I've always known that you are very thoughtful and analytical about what you're doing. And it got me thinking about you as a kid and thinking, okay, and I can identify with this. I was funny in a very private way, quiet way, but not out loud to a lot of people. I always say I was not the class clown.
Neither was I.
Yeah. And what were you like?
I was, well, first off, I didn't go to the same school for more than 2 years until high school.
Mm-hmm.
So I just got bounced all over the city of Birmingham. So humor was the tool to kind of be like, if someone cracked on me or made a joke about me, I'd laugh it off. Sometimes I'd self-deprecate, tag myself.
Sure.
Maybe jab you back, but just keep it peaceful. But I did not want a lot of attention on me because attention was bad. Like that was you're inviting the bullies.
I think I read somewhere that once you used to talk to your hamster.
Yeah. Guinea pig. Yeah, Joel. Yeah.
You go into the room.
Full-blown conversation. Like,
hey, I disagree. Yeah. You're actually getting
call
into
and response. Yeah, not like just you only understand me. Like, yeah, so what do you think?
Yeah.
Oh, really? Okay, well, maybe I'll do that.
Today they would medicate you. That's the problem.
Not realizing that was the medication because
Sure.
that was the outlet. I went outside, I played, I stayed out of trouble for the most part in the neighborhood. My mom got me a really nice basketball goal. There was a park up the street. I grew up on the west side.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a park on Pearson Avenue called Powderly Park. And that was the free public park with the courts. What do you mean drinking and fighting? And there was always something going on. So my mom, to keep me from going to Powderly all the time, she got me in the boys club. And then she also put a basketball goal in my yard. And the way our yard was set up, we had really high trees. So we had the only shaded driveway in peak 1 p.m. Alabama heat. So everybody would come from Powderly. Why play in direct sunlight when we can go play at Roy Wood's house? And so people would just come to, and it was out of respect.
Very smart of your mom to do that, because they say when you become a parent and then your kids, as mine are, teenagers, everyone says you want your house to be the base. You want people coming over to your house because it's safer.
Yeah. And all you have to do is my mom is just listen for the dribble of the ball. So you know I'm out there.
Yeah.
And so that became a way that I met everybody in the neighborhood. And out of respect to my father, my parents, all the riffraff that happened at Powderly never happened at our house. Just on some respect your elders type shit.
Yeah. I want to make sure I educate anyone who's listening that you mentioned your father. Your father, Roy Wood Sr., was a radio broadcasting journalism pioneer and also in the trenches of the civil rights movement in the 60s.
Yeah.
And you've said if there's any march with Dr. King in it, your dad, there's a good chance.
3 rows back.
He's probably 3 rows back. And people in the neighborhood then knew that, obviously, and that respect probably emanated out from your father and your mother.
1,000%.
Gave you some sense of protection.
My father was the voice in the car when their parents took them to school,
mm-hmm.
doing the news on the black radio station. So you can listen to all the black music you want in the morning, but when they stop for that news break on the 5s, that's my pops.
Yeah.
So that got me a lot of equity within the city. But I wouldn't say that I was even remotely like on some funny sense of humor shit until high school. And even then it was only baseball, because that was where you could be silly, because it's sports. It's a permission, especially in high school. Sports is permission to behave in ways you're not allowed to at school. So you tell all the crass jokes, you make fun of each other, and then we would just, as a bench warmer in high school, your job is to heckle the other team.
Yeah.
Just heckle them into oblivion. And I was good because that's all I had to do. So there were days where I would literally sit and write heckles in class.
To get ready for your game.
To get ready for the game. Just...
That's great.
Brutal shit, bro. Like stuff you couldn't even, places you couldn't even go with humor now, but just brutal, and just yelling it across the diamond at a total stranger and seeing the look of frustration in their face. Like, I know I'm getting to you. And then to the point where if you got the parents to chuckle, like that was an applause break. If you got the umpire to call timeout because the umpire had to laugh, that's a standing ovation. And that was the goal. The goal every game was to break the umpire. But not realizing that was essentially just honing improv chops.
Sure, yeah.
And just working on crowd work. It's a crowd work set.
Well, all this stuff, it's everyone has their own versions about it, versions of it. But I know what you're talking about, which is, I come from a big family, so we all sit around this round table that's still at my parents' house. And I know exactly where I sat, and I know that that's where I tried to get the whole table laughing.
I was in JROTC in high school, and when we would have to do drill some mornings, and we would start with running. They had like this quadruple tennis court. Yeah. So we'd have to do laps around the whole perimeter of this tennis court. And as we're jogging, I'm calling the jog like a Kentucky Derby announcer. And they get into turn two, and they're pulling even. It's Roy next to Monica. Monica coming up on the outside, coming up on the inside is Sergeant Major. Sergeant Major's coming in.
And you're supposed to be controlling your breath because you're running and you're doing this bullshit.
It doesn't matter. Wood's falling short. But as they get into the backstretch, that was who I was. Yeah. Just so we're laughing as we're running around the space. And that's when you start learning about comedy as this like tool of manipulation. Like it's literally, I bet you I can make you detour from whatever your mental objectives are right now by doing something. It's like tickling with your mouth.
Yes. I'm curious. Your father, this very revered figure, I think he passed away when you were pretty young.
Yeah, 16.
16 years old. What would he think of your career as a stand-up? Would he approve of that move?
I don't think so. He would approve now based on the material that I'm doing now.
Right.
But you also have to remember, my father saw every horrible thing that you could name because he just had to cover it in the name of journalism.
Yeah.
Like foreign war reporting. So he saw like African civil wars, which are way worse in terms of body counts and the heinousness because a lot of that goes underreported, right? So he's seen stuff. So nothing's funny to him. And so case in point, when he worked at WVON in Chicago, my father was the first news director at this black-owned black news station. We are a news station that only does black news. Like if the N in NPR stood for
Say it. No.
So they were dedicated to the black experience and uplifting black people. My father hires a guy named Don Cornelius.
Oh yeah.
To be a DJ. Don Cornelius was a police officer in Chicago. He pulled my father over, gave him a ticket.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's where okay.
Don Cornelius' origin story, he was a member of law enforcement for about a year, maybe less than 2 for sure. Pulls my dad over. In the course of giving my father a ticket, my dad just goes, "You have a nice voice. Here's my card. Quit doing this shit and come by the radio station." So Don Cornelius starts in radio under my father as a reporter at WVON. And during that time, as Don's understanding the media grows, he comes up with the idea for Soul Train. Comes to my dad. My dad was one of the initial investors. And gave Don some of the money that he used ultimately for the first pilot for Soul Train. And then when it came time to give my dad his money back, Don Cornelius goes to my father and is like, "Hey, man, instead of me paying you back, why don't you just stay on board? I wouldn't, this is, I just want you to be a part of this." To which my dad told Don Cornelius, and I quote, "Motherfucker, nobody wants to watch niggas dance for an hour. Give me my fucking money."
Oh my God.
So my dad just was not with party culture.
Yeah.
He was not with fun. He just couldn't see it.
Well, also, I mean, yeah, and it's hard to blame him because of everything he saw and being in the trenches of the civil rights movement like that.
And then some dude's just going, what if we dance all day?
People have giant afros. Yes.
He couldn't see it.
He couldn't see it.
That celebration of blackness creates the black pride that helps to drive people to want more for themselves, for their community. He couldn't see it. When I was in middle school, I was in a dunk tank for our soccer team to raise money for jerseys. And my dad came into the dunk tank and cussed me out and told me to get out the dunk tank in front of everybody. Like, get out of there. You nobody's fool. You ain't gonna be nobody's fool. All this joking and shucking. Get that lesson. I'm like, it's a dunk tank.
We're raising money. It's just, I'm just going to get splashed in some water.
Yeah, we're raising money so we have decent uniforms, because when you're a black middle school, you're only playing whites. This is soccer in 88. There's not a lot of black schools playing soccer. So we're playing all of our uniforms, bro. We borrowed jerseys from the Partners in Neighborhood Growth, which was like the police athletic league at the time in Birmingham. So you have a community league that has jerseys. We're borrowing their jerseys. That's how poor our school was. And then my dad is like, nah, get your ass up out of there. And it was very embarrassing. And I just remember after that, I just never tried to be funny around him again.
Yeah.
Because just, you're not with jokes, bro. He was a lot of things. He was not hilarious.
You mentioned The Daily Show. Got to ask, how do you like that gig?
I like it. I think late night's changing. Mm-hmm. I don't know in the what though.
Yeah.
So that's the thing that's a little uneasy. It's been very fun. You know, Trevor's departure was definitely not a shock. Him leaving was not a shock to me. When was more of the shock, and how.
Yeah.
You know, like that. But
because I don't even think anybody knew.
No one knew.
Yeah.
Not a soul. And he just said it on the show, and then we went to a commercial break. Wow. It's like, what? So,
have you asked him about that thought process that went behind that, or is that a mystery?
I think a lot of it was just boiled down to I just didn't want anybody to talk me out of it. Because when you're doing something that monumental, everybody's going to have an opinion, and that's just him taking control over his own life and decisions. So I respect it. I enjoy it. I've had a lot of fun on The Daily Show. The question becomes, what is late night changing into? Because our job is to parody the news, but if the way people get their news is changing, then the vehicles and how we parody have to match the evolution of how news is consumed.
Yeah.
But how news is being consumed, that's the question that has to be explored and looked at.
How do you parody Marjorie Taylor Greene? How do you parody what's really happening? Because what's really happening has become, and Santos, and back in the day when I was getting started writing comedy in college, I was part of this Lampoon organization that would do like a parody of Time magazine, a parody of Newsweek, and you can parody something that's got a straight line. You can parody something that's very stiff and formal.
Universally, everybody understands.
And then so a parody of it is kind of delightful. But we always knew you can't parody the National Enquirer. I think Saturday Night Live struggles with that. I think everybody struggles with it.
Yeah, I do think that there is a way to fish in a different pond from the traditional people who we get the opinions from.
Yep.
So I think that's part of the evolution. When you look at TikTok and Instagram, what's interesting and a lot of this is from the shutdown, a lot of people who were former consumers of information now purport themselves to be distributors of information. And we regular Joe Blow people accept them as aggregators of, this guy Tim said it, so let me see what Tim has to say. He's got a good camera, and that's a nice lens. I trust Tim now.
He's got a good beanbag chair behind him.
Yeah, I follow him on YouTube now.
Yep.
So there are more people putting information out there as well. And I think to a degree, as a society, as a country at least, we've become okay with not caring who we get our news from.
Yeah.
Or the accuracy of it. And I think that the parody lies in that.
Yep.
I think the parody lies not necessarily in what the news of the day is, but the delivery method of it. And as we would, people go to bed, like, let's just be real about the ratings of linear television as a whole.
Yeah.
Not even late night. Everything's going down.
Mm-hmm.
So if ratings are going down, part of it is because people are laying in bed looking at Tim in his beanbag and his LED light, because that's just as good and entertaining for them as what's nice and polished on a shiny floor studio.
I will tell you this. I'm an old timer, and I came up in late night at a time when late night shows, there weren't that many, but because of the way TV was structured, these shows made money hand over fist. And that's why shows had an orchestra. They had a big band. They had, money. That is not the way it is anymore. And so you will see the effects. The effects will be maybe some of these late night shows, as hosts retire or leave, will be replaced with something else. Maybe that time will go back to the affiliates. Everyone's speculating, but who knows what's going to happen. I do have to say this, because I know you're a busy man. I want to let you go, but I do sincerely feel really good that you're out there. You're a really good man. You're very thoughtful and crazily talented. And I'm glad you're out there and you're thinking about this, because I think it makes me feel better about the whole world of comedy. I'm serious. I'm being honest with you.
Thank you.
Makes me, I always have been very impressed with you. And I'm just, the more you do, the more just crazily impressed I am. So go forth, continue doing great work. And I know that we're in good hands. Like when I meet people much younger than me who are, ethical and wise and creative, I feel better. I sleep better at night. So thank you.
Well,
seriously.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah.
Appreciate you for having me.
Well, I appreciate you. Now, please get out. I wanted it to end with me throwing you out.
Get out.
I said get out! I want to start today by saying that I saw your performance on the White House Correspondents' Dinner, and I thought you were fantastic. I thought you were absolutely fantastic. And I've done that venue. I've played that thing twice. Once under Clinton, but the hardest one was following Obama, which, it was almost like he was hosting The Daily Show. He had audio visual. He had, they had all this stuff. He had all these writers working on it. He had, it was perfectly produced. I think he spent more time on that White House Correspondents' Dinner than he did. I bet the economy tanked the week that he did the Correspondents' Dinner. And he just, and so my experience was, and I'm sure maybe it's the same, but you sit with the First Lady. Was that your experience?
Sit right next to Joe Biden.
Yeah. And my experience was I'm sitting next to Michelle Obama, and Obama's up there and he's killing, and I know I'm supposed to follow him. And I've got all these jokes, which I think are pretty good. I've worked hard on it, but they don't let you know what the president's going to do. Yes. And the president gets to go first. Yes. So you're there with all these jokes you've been working on for 6 months, and they're saying, Obama's up there and he'll do one that's kind of close to something that I was going to do.
Yeah.
Because it's all the same stuff in the news. So I'm trying to flip through all my blue cards and take out the ones that he's touching to drop them.
Yeah.
But at the same time, Michelle Obama's talking to me, and she's saying, so your children are how old now, Conan? And at one point, and it's so funny because she's the greatest. She's such a lovely, I've friendly with her. She's such a lovely person. She's the star in every room. She's beautiful. She's really funny. But in this one moment, I'm thinking, would you please leave me alone?
Shut up.
I've got to figure out if he's doing my debt ceiling joke or not.
I can't remember who it was next to Trevor Noah last year when Trevor did the Correspondents' Dinner. But Trevor came up there and was like straight laser focused on his set. And whoever it was on one side of Trevor, somebody was like, well, why aren't you talking to Trevor? Why didn't you talk to Trevor? They're like, he was focusing on his stuff.
Yeah.
He didn't have time to chit chat.
It is the way not to do comedy is to make the comedian sit out in front of the audience for an hour and a half and then watch someone else go up and get the
Yeah.
like, and it's just it's a crazy kind of show business, but it's a fascinating experience. And I later got to talk on this program. I got to talk to President Obama, and I said, it's so unfair because you were so, I said, you're so good and you've got all the best material and you are the most powerful person in the world, and comedy is all about status, and you get to go first. And then with no ceremony, the minute he's done, they just go like, ladies and gentlemen, Conan O'Brien.
No buffer.
No buffer, nothing. And he said, yeah. He said, yeah, I know it's not fair, but I don't care. I thought that is just so true. What does he care?
And then Biden closes with this dark Brandon joke, which I guess is like his alter ego.
Yeah, with the sunglasses. Yeah.
And so then he's standing there while I'm being introduced.
Still milking the laughs. Yeah.
Milking.
Yeah.
Still playing the room. And now I have to walk past him to get to it's like, come on, man. You just ripped. Just go. Leave. Just get the hell out of here. Why are you?
It's not. It's funny. It's not. It's not about the comedian on those nights.
That's the other thing. Joe Biden's in my ear. I'm going over cards, and then my writers are texting, "Hey man, Kellyanne Conway's in the room. Hey, I'm on Twitter right now. Turns out Fauci did show up. If you have a Fauci joke, maybe you should add a Fauci joke." And then they're just ganging jokes in the WhatsApp thread, and I'm like, guys, everyone, please shut the fuck up. I can't.
Yes. Yeah.
But thanks for that information. Bill Barr's here. Oh, okay, cool. Oh, Caitlyn Jenner's here. Okay, cool. And it's a lot, but it's just trying to figure out at that point where to add a joke. I would say that's when the set for me was like, okay, these are the jokes.
Yes.
Fauci, all right, maybe. And then Biden goes up. Biden stepped on, I had a Rupert Murdoch Fox News joke that I just threw out altogether because Biden's was funnier.
Yep.
And I could do mine, but it's not gonna, why even bother? And then his Tucker Carlson and Don Lemon stuff hit so hard that I reordered.
Yep.
I changed the batting order to create more space between those two topics for me.
I was doing the same thing. Like this joke comes out. Okay, Obama just hit that. This joke comes out. This joke's still okay, but it flips up here now because it's got to go earlier to sort of tag what he said. And you're doing all that while the most important woman in the country is chatting you up about, what college do you think your daughter might be interested in?
we talked about Alabama and the South and barbecue, and I was nervous in a weird way because, like my first inclination when I spoke with her was just to go, "Don't worry, you're safe."
Yeah.
Like, are you just gaming me to find out what I'm going to say about you?
Sure. Yeah. Exactly.
Because there's a lot of that shit the week of. Get DMs from people at particular news organizations. Hey man, how you been? You ready for Saturday? I know what you're trying to do.
You're trying to butter me up.
Yeah.
So I don't go after you.
Yeah. So no, she was very nice, but we're not talking policy and how to solve immigration.
Right.
It's just, Alabama barbecue tastes different from Carolina barbecue. Yes, you're right, it does. And then how for me, and I don't know if this was right, but I chose to also have a care of concern for how the outside world would consume my performance.
Mm-hmm.
Because everyone goes, it's a corporate, treat it like a corporate gig for an auto manufacturer company. You're just going to do your car jokes, car industry jokes, and they're going to like them. But I'm like, yeah, but there's people that are going to watch this later, and I kind of want to have a joke that they kind of would relate to. So how do we balance the two? And so then it just became how to use pop culture in there as kind of the glue. Like for as long as you hear a word of a thing that you recognize and you're familiar with.
Yeah.
Like the joke at the top about the Fox News. I'm not going to do any jokes about Dominion because Dominion will come after you. Matter of fact, Dominion is my favorite voting machine.
If you want the truth, have Dominion in the booth.
Yeah.
Such a great joke. Yeah.
So then the tag was, if there's people, there's the original joke was, if there's two people you don't want to see in court, it's Dominion and Cardi B.
Yeah.
Either you know the Cardi B 4 million defamation suit story or you don't.
Yeah.
Then one of my writers, I got to give credit to Lily Blumpkin. She's over at The Daily Show. Lily goes, also Gwyneth Paltrow.
Yes.
And I go, because I don't swim in that world.
But guess what? Which is smart, and credit to your writer that and you for seeing that or that resonating with you is, okay, now you've let everybody into the tent. Because if you don't know Cardi B, you definitely know, that means you were definitely following Gwyneth's trial and saying, and so, I mean, that brings up.
One tag informs you about the tag you don't understand.
Yeah. What I appreciated too, you were hitting both sides. Which doesn't always happen. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I thought, so yeah, you can get up there and you can go after Tucker Carlson, but you were also had plenty of stuff on Don Lemon, and it was pretty clear that you were not playing favorites with the right or the left, which I think is really important right now.
The biggest debate within assembling the whole set was, when do we hit Biden? Do you hit him before or after Trump? Mm-hmm. To set up the whole idea of, oh no, I'm going to go at the liberals too.
Sure.
But if you go at Biden too soon, you lose the whole room.
Yep.
Because you haven't earned their trust with any joke. It's like, so what do you do?
Yeah.
So we stacked the set with what I like to call soft targets first, that I feel like everybody in the room would be okay with. So Fox News, Tucker, Santos,
yep,
Don Lemon,
right,
and then Trump a little bit, but not too much Trump as to not make it think that this whole thing is about Trump.
Yep.
Then you go into everybody else.
I think you had this great joke about, France is burning to the ground because people do not want to work an extra 2 years. They want to retire at 62, not 64. And they're literally burning Paris. And he said, we have a guy here who's 81 or 80 and is begging us to get to work for 4 more years. And to me, that was, I was laughing really hard, but it's also so fun to see Biden has to laugh,
Yeah.
And it's also a really funny joke. It's a really funny joke that you can relate to. And it's not, but I thought what was really smart is the first thing you do when you get up to the podium, because you got to get them early. First thing you do when you got up to the podium is you said, I think you left some documents up here.
Yeah. First joke.
And it's just silly, because it's so silly that he accidentally left some top secret documents at the podium. And they cut to him and he laughs, and it's like, to me, that's great because you broke the ice, and it's such a silly joke. Like, you know what I mean? Yeah. It's silly that he gets up on the podium and leaves some top secret documents. I was howling at that. It was great to have right away.
I remember very clearly hearing that, there's going to be this movie, Grand Theft Auto, and it's directed by Ron Howard. Now, since then, we're very familiar with the idea of an on-camera person directing a film. But I remember at the time thinking, what?
Yeah.
It wasn't done. It didn't feel like this is really,
Well, I felt that pressure because, I was that. I might as well have had that famous T-shirt. What I really want to do is direct since I was about 14, and I would get the most sort of patronizing responses when I would admit it. But I also made the most out of those situations, and I would hang with the directors and take notes and do all kinds of things. But that was not a transition, and particularly to have been a kid actor on a sitcom, the whole thing, it was ludicrous in people's minds.
You must have a confidence because you knew on some level I got this.
Yes, I did. In fact, I directed. Started shooting Grand Theft Auto the day after my 23rd birthday, but I was disappointed because I had really planned to direct a feature while I was still in my teens. That was my goal, Right. Again, it was, the business was so much more closed then, and then there was not even any like MTV or anything where you could go and prove your chops somewhere.
Today, people can make a film using their phone.
You take this phone and
you make something and people go, hey, that was, and then you put it online, and you don't need to convince a studio if it gets like, this got 10 million likes. you're good. You have a chance of making something.
Well, by the way, I just got to jump to the documentary that we're going to talk about, Jim Henson. I made a documentary about Jim Henson and the Muppets, but he and his wife Jane were so much like the young content creators of today.
Yes.
Because they're the new medium, the new thing, the tech that was interesting to them was TV, which was just brand new. And he wasn't even interested in puppets, but he loved television. He wanted to be a part of it. He was living in Washington, and he went down there and just kind of they were looking for a 5-minute puppet show to go with the news. I mean, but they were just experimenting with TV. And he got in on the experiment along with Jane, ultimately became his wife. But you look at these crazy little 6-second commercials they did and these little 5-minute bits they did for after the news hour. And it was so inventive. And it was all bets are off and just kind of whatever you want to do. But they were getting their 10,000 hours in, and they were doing what a content creator does now, which is find your voice, see if anybody's interested, figure out what they're interested in, and go for there. Well, at that time there was really no outlet like that for me. I mean, I literally was thinking about going down to public access television and trying to do a show on public access television.
Because getting the chance to direct a feature film. Entertainment was so much smaller. You said it was closed. It was a very insular world.
Yes.
There's 3 networks.
Right.
There's a couple of studios. They make the stuff. They decide who the people are. And so it's very impossible to crack into that.
Yeah.
And especially if they have a preconceived notion. Like, I'm sorry, you're the guy from Happy Days and you're Opie.
Now, I could have had a chance to direct Happy Days episodes in a contract renegotiation, but I said no to that because I didn't want anybody other than Jerry Paris to direct. It would be not fair to the cast. And the other thing I thought was, well, what if I whiff? Every once in a while, an episode doesn't work.
Yeah.
And if I do well, they say, well, it's this show. If I have an off episode, then he can't even direct his own show.
Right.
And it's 3 camera, not what I wanted to do. But Roger Corman was one of the few people who was taking that kind of a risk. And I knew that about him. And he wanted me to act in a movie called Eat My Dust. And I read Eat My Dust, and I didn't much care for it. I saw no Oscars no Oscar opportunities in that one. But I did have a script that I'd written that was it's kind of a slice of life about a guy stuck over college break and in Hollywood, and I had some short films, and I was supposed to go in and have this meeting about Eat My Dust. American Graffiti had been a big hit. Happy Days was becoming a #1 show, and Roger wanted me to be in this car crash comedy. And my agent was going to come with me to sit with me to have this meeting, and he was my agent for my whole childhood. And I remember saying, "You can't go in with me." I was only 21, but I knew I was going to try to barter.
Yeah.
And he didn't care about that. I knew he didn't care about that. So I remember the look on his face. He was shattered. His client said, "No, don't go to the meeting." So I went in, talked to Roger. I said, I don't love Eat My Dust, but what I really want to do is direct. Here's a script. I think I've raised half the money coming out of Australia, $150,000. I need another $150,000 in distribution. And if you do that, then I'll happily be in Eat My Dust. He read it. He got back to me. He looked at my student films, and he said, "Well, that's a character piece. It's very well written, but it's not what I do." And he said, "Here's what I'll promise you. If you act in Eat My Dust, I'll give you a chance to write a script. If you write the script and I like it, and you're willing to be in it again, then I'll let you direct that. If that fails, I'll let you direct the second unit on something, in the car crashes or the fights or something else." So I thought, okay, so here's my big, I leveraged my way into a second unit job.
Yeah.
That's going to look great on the resume, but I took it. And when Eat My Dust succeeded, I went in and I pitched so many different ideas, a sci-fi thing, a noir thing, just different kinds of projects. And he smiled and he said, he said, when we were testing, he was very erudite, Roger.
Yes, I remember, yeah.
He had been to Caltech and he was an engineering, an engineer at heart. He said, when we were testing titles for Eat My Dust, there was another title that came in a very strong second. Grand Theft Auto. If you can fashion a car crash comedy that we can correctly entitle Grand Theft Auto, I'd probably make that picture.
Yeah.
And my dad and I cooked up an outline. We wrote a script in a month. It was the fastest green light I've had in my entire career as a director.
And I think Roger Corman passed, I believe, a week ago.
A week ago, yes.
Yeah. And
age 98.
98 years
so
old.
So sharp. I talked to him 6 months ago. I mean, he went to see my 13 Lives. He went to a screening. He had, he was so supportive of all of his graduates. He just remained.
Well, he must have been
connected.
incredibly proud of what he was
proud of
off.
all of us.
Yeah.
He was proud of all of us. Jim Cameron, Joe Dante, Alan Arkish, Francis Coppola and Scorsese, Bogdanovich. The list goes on. Hi, my name is Ron Howard, and I feel, frankly, indifferent about being Conan O'Brien's friend.
You know what? And no one says this often, but Ron Howard, you prick. You have this reputation of being like, oh, he's the nicest guy. And then you come in here and you take me off.
I can take it or leave it.
Yeah.
I'm here, but I'm here. I'm here.
To be honest, you really could. I mean, I was shocked you showed up. You've had a level of success. Frankly, I'm surprised when anyone shows up. But you've had a level of success where, you do not need to be here, and I'm appreciative that you're here.
No, I actually do. I've always loved conversations with you, going back to your rookie year on TV.
That's right. You came on. You were one of the early people to come on the show, and you agreed to do a bit. No one knew who I was, and we were trying very, very out there bits. And we said, what we want to do is we want to saw your arm off. And you said, okay. And we did a bit where you had a stunt arm, and at one point we're talking, and I just take out a saw, and I saw your arm off, and you're screaming. And you were fantastic. And of course, most people didn't know who I was. You were, you've been iconic since, 1965. So and beloved. And so I remember, this is back when people would write in with complaints, but people were saying, the way you treated Ron Howard. I didn't really saw his arm off.
I loved it. Hey, a funny redhead. There you go.
Okay. I have a very clear, distinct memory of getting invited to some event. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was like a Vanity Fair party, something where I would feel a little bit out of place and thinking, do I belong here? And I'm with my wife, and I get, they seat me at a table with you and your wife and a couple of other people, but we're all right next to each other. And then you and I start to get into this very intense conversation. And I remember people at the table thinking, wow, what are Conan and Ron Howard talking about? It's really intense. Like, are they talking about film? What are they talking about? My wife leaned over and she listened, and then she said to the rest of the group, sunblock. And it was true. It was true. And you were saying like, no, here's what I do. I always try and wear a hat, but it's got to be at least a 45. And I was like, yeah, but is there zinc in there? And you're like, here's the deal, Conan. Zinc can be problematic. And we went really deep. And of course your wife was like, yeah.
Well, my wife's a redhead.
Yes.
Your color hair.
Yes.
Vivid redhead. And same as Bryce. When Bryce was our firstborn, and the first time that we took her in, we went to the dermatologist, Cheryl and I, and brought Bryce. And Bryce was literally in our arms, so she was maybe a year old.
Yeah.
And the dermatologist, gives us each our checkup and so forth. And then he says, you're gonna have to keep a hat on her. You're gonna have to keep her. And then he looked at Cheryl and looked at me and he said, she's very pale. She's pale. I said, yes, we know she's pale. He said, you're not gonna have any more kids, are you?
Oh my God.
He meant it.
Oh my God. Yeah. I remember distinctly having a conversation with a dermatologist once where he said, okay, this is when I'm in my 30s. And he went, okay, I mean, but look at the freckling you have, the sun damage. And I went, well, yeah, and he said, well, did you do sunblock? And I said, yeah. And he said, do you wear a hat? Yeah. Do you wear long shirts? Yeah. Okay, but what about some days do you ever like walk, how do you get from like the car to the, and I said, you know what? I live on the planet Earth and there's nothing we can do about that because it has a sun. So some sun is going to get to me. And it's like, well, you know, it's your death.
It's like they're afraid you're going to bring down their the level of life expectancy for their patients.
Yes, and for everybody.
Besmirch their record. Or something.
It's going to lead to a lawsuit. Probably. You mentioned Bryce, who I adore. She's a terrific talent, beautiful. You must be very proud of her. You told me that when she came on my show once, it was a very tense moment for you. Why?
Well, I mean, I'm a parent of adults. That sort of constant worrying about your kids is kind of, it's kind of faded. I feel pretty confident about it.
I don't have that. I just thought like, hey man, I'm in show business. I got to worry about myself. Yeah. These kids are on their own.
Well, good for you. Yeah. But you walk your path.
Yeah. Okay.
But she said, I'm going to cry on demand on Conan's show. And I said, "Oh, come on, Bryce." And I've seen her do it. Yeah. She can cry. She can cry on command. And I said, "But that's not. I mean, it's a show. It's a live show. I mean, it's." And she said, "No, I'm going to do it." And so then she told me it worked. So I know that. And yet, when I watched her on the show doing it, I was so edge of my seat. Still,
yeah. I'll tell you. I recommend if you get a second, check this out. Because Bryce was on the show and she did this, and it was really, I think, I mean, I can't say this about my own show, but it was a very cool moment of television because she said she was going to do it. The whole audience gets very quiet, and there's a process, and you can hear a pin drop. Right. My heart's pounding because I'm thinking I'm the host of the show. I can only imagine.
Failure's not that funny.
Yeah, I had gotten used to it at that point.
And sometimes I just wander the aisles all by myself in Home Depot, and I think about all the amazing things that they have, and I think about all the incredible products they have, and I think about everything that they have at Home Depot, and I just think to myself, my God, Home Depot, how do you do this? How do you do this incredible thing? You give so much and you get so little in return. I mean, some people pay for the stuff, but are they really paying you enough for what it's worth? They're not really paying you what you really should have. And I think that at some point, people should actually give Home Depot what they're due because it's not fair. It's a company. It's in a company that should be compensated. Oh my God!
It was a moment, and I've heard about it from so many people.
And when the tear finally rolled down, I was like, "Oh,
yeah,
no!"
Everybody
might as well have been a Super Bowl touchdown.
Yeah.
But here's the thing about Bryson crying. Her first professional job, maybe not her first time on Broadway, was this Tartuffe, this classic show, and so here she is. In this theater, opening night, she is sick, fever. Cheryl and I had to get her to the theater, and we weren't sure she was going to be able to even do the show. But of course, it's opening night, so she's doing it. And there's this scene where she's at her father's feet and begging for something, and she starts crying. And we're sitting in like the third row, and it's it's theater, so people can fake cry, and it kind of works. But she's really crying. Tears are going down her face, and it's just like an unbelievable moment for me, coming from a theatrical family and all that. And I looked over, and Cheryl's just kind of sitting with her arms crossed, kind of with a little smile on her face, no emotion whatsoever. So we get to intermission, and I said, "Babe, weren't you knocked out by that moment? I mean, there she is. She's got a fever. It's her opening night. She's crying real tears on Broadway." And she said, "Are you kidding me? She did that every day of her life when she was 17.
Because she couldn't use the car. We've all seen that. It's really worth noting that your career, improbable in so many ways, because just on Andy Griffith alone, you could have spent the rest of your life going to setting up a card table and going to conventions and having that amazing experience. And it's so funny because I get to interview so many terrific actors, talking to Walton Goggins the other day, talking to Billy Bob Thornton. Both of them cite that show, the Andy Griffith show, as being seminal for them.
Amazing.
And I think I understand it because it's character comedy.
Mm-hmm.
Not afraid of a long pause.
Right.
Not afraid of, and I was saying there's scenes outside the courthouse or in the barbershop that feel like waiting for Godot.
Yeah.
And beautiful. Like it really does hold up.
Well, it's, it was so much a function of a kind of singular creative voice. Not that Andy wrote, he wasn't didn't have a producer credit, but it was his show. It was tailored to his sensibility. And Sheldon Leonard, who was the executive producer and very active on the show, was this old character actor who had become this incredible television producer who had great success with Danny Thomas and Van Dyke and the Andy Griffith Show. And for a moment, he was like the comedy producer, but he was there all the time, and they were always stressing character. And Andy used to kill jokes if they were too broad. And he just kept saying the South is plenty funny on its own, without having to reach for it and do slapstick and stuff, like he didn't like Petticoat Junction and not Hillbilly Elegy. That's a movie I directed. He didn't like Beverly Hillbillies. Beverly Hillbillies.
Right.
And because they were doing sketch basically.
Yes.
And
high concept.
He didn't like Little Abner.
Right.
And so as a result, I mean, I don't know that there have been other single camera shows that kind of held that tone. Maybe Real McCoy's a little bit, but they didn't have Don Knotts.
Yes.
And
I was remarking recently that it's the ability to have, two characters just talking about, oh, it's a nice day.
Well, those bits were usually when the show was short.
Yes.
And they would come, so we would shoot Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, single camera, rehearse on read on Thursdays, rehearse Fridays, shoot Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And several times, these scenes that you're, the kinds that you're citing, usually between Don and Andy.
Yep.
I remember vividly Aaron Rubin, our showrunner, coming down and saying, talking to Andy, and then Andy he always called Don Jesse. Yeah. And he would say, Jesse, we're short. Come on. And at the very last thing of the end of the Wednesday night shoot would be the two of them, and they would have just talked about it a little bit, and they'd wind up doing one of these scenes.
And they're amazing, and it's just they're I love watching them because they're just playing the silences, and it's so well. And of course, you've got these two consummate, beautiful actors. They're just such great comedic actors, but just oh boy, it's a nice day. Sure is, isn't it? Yep. Yep. You're watching it and you're thinking, I have this theory that comedy has been increasingly compressed to the point now that when any series starts, they have to start at the most dramatic moment, and then that turns out it's a flashback.
Right.
Because they can't start slowly. People can flip to another streaming platform too quickly.
Right.
So every show starts with main character has 5 bullet holes in them and is screaming, and then you cut to 2 weeks earlier.
Right.
And I think they don't trust us
right.
that this is going somewhere.
Right.
And there's a lot of parallel editing and everything. And just the idea that one of the most popular shows in television history could often consist of people playing things in that pace.
And the fact that the show really does endure. I mean, it's actually on like all the time. And especially over COVID, I kept hearing from people that it was like a lifeline, for them. But here's the thing. How lucky was I to grow up in that situation where, in fact, the environment was set up for actors to not improvise, but participate, make suggestions, things like that. And even as a 6-year-old, I mean, my dad was having to read the lines at the read-through, and I would just kind of sit there at first, my father rants. But later, when I started to learn to read and so forth, I was in it. And I actually started occasionally making a suggestion, and it never went anywhere. Kind of pissed me off a little bit. In that first year. Yeah. And I will never forget it was the second episode of the second season, and I had turned 7, and we were rehearsing this scene where I was supposed to come into the courthouse, and Otis Hal Smith, Otis, that was over here, and Andy was there, and Don was somewhere else. And I came in, and I was supposed to say, "Hey, Pa, something, something," whatever the line was. And then I sort of stopped, and the director, Bob Sweeney, said, "What is it, Ronnie?" And I said, "Well, I don't think a kid would say it that way."
Oh.
And he said, "Well, how do you think a kid would say it?" I don't remember what the line was, but I pitched my little little fix on it, and he said, "Okay, good, yeah, do it that way." And it was just like I was a part of it. I just felt this surge of being involved in something. Yeah. And Andy from across said, "What are you grinning at, youngin'?" And I said, "What's the first idea of mine you've taken?" And he gave it the proper beat, and he said, "Well, it was the first one that was any damn good. Now let's rehearse the scene."
To a 7-year-old.
But you know what's also nice? If you look at the history of situation comedies, especially usually and increasingly so through the 70s and 80s and 90s, the kid's role was to say something overly sophisticated and wise-assy that a kid would never say.
Right.
So that's where you get, all these, the Gary Coleman character that's just like, well, if you ask me, sounds like this guy's paying too many taxes. And
I love that episode.
I know. That was, I agree with him. I think we are paying too many taxes. But, and what I think really holds up well is your character is a real boy. You're playing the reality of the situations. You're not saying, "No, let me get this straight. Otis is drunk again? Sounds like someone needs rehab." And like winking at the camera, which by the way would have been a great line. But
yeah, that's but well, okay. This is something that means a lot to me, and it was I didn't know anything about it at the time, but later Andy told me this. So when we were doing like a revival, Return to Mayberry, or one of those interview sort of specials or something, Andy told me this, that in that very first season, the first episode, that my dad was an actor.
Yep.
Not a famous actor, but he was professional and working. Took it upon himself to just go up quietly to Andy at one point and say, "Now I see they're writing Opie kind of the way they write the Rusty Hamer character on Danny Thomas." And like so many shows where he's a wise ass.
Yeah.
And he said that, Ronnie can do that and everything, but what if he actually respected his father? And Andy thought about it and told me years later that he went back to the writers and said, let's write Andy Opie like Ronnie Rance.
Oh, wow.
And and let's try that. And they went for it.
Yeah. Well, it stands out. It's interesting because, again, we've been fed a steady diet of everyone hates dad. Dad's an idiot.
Right.
And the kid
knows it.
And the kid knows it and is always letting him know it. And it got amped up, sometimes stretched out in kind of a meta way, like on Married with Children, where or sometimes The Simpsons, where they're actively plotting their father's death.
But it does make me laugh. It's effective.
No, it's really funny, and I think the right way to go. My point is, your dad was wrong, and I don't think you should be here. A lot of people forget this, but your documentary brings it back. I was a writer at Saturday Night Live for a couple of years. Then I'm doing the late night show. And our studio was on the 6th floor, and the Saturday Night Live studio was on the 8th floor. But right down the 6th floor, not far down the 6th floor, there was a little office, because in the early days of SNL, the first season, Jim Henson, Frank Oz, they're doing, the Muppets are part of SNL, and they had a little office, and they drew all of these characters on these pipes.
Right.
And now, of course, it's been put behind glass and preserved. But in my day, you could just go by and there's some pipes there and they're just covered with
those drawings. Yeah, amazing.
And I'm trying to wipe them off, because I like clean pipes.
Oh, no!
I just think pipes should be clean.
No.
But I couldn't get them off. No, but
but that was a misstep for them, right?
Yes.
Because that kind of didn't
well,
work out.
What's interesting is that all the cutting edge, cool, sardonic, Michael O'Donoghue's, wise asses at first season SNL were like, these puppets, what are they? These puppets are here. I hate these puppets. And so it was very, you can tell in the documentary, crushing to Jim Henson. And then he spirals off from that and creates The Muppet Show.
Yeah. But he'd been trying to sell The Muppet Show for years and failing. I mean, all the networks turned it down twice. There's a hilarious pitch sort of video that they made that is
using the Muppets to sell the idea.
And going completely over the top, and it's Jim's voice, and it's just brilliant. You know, it's so interesting because Jim was, you got to really know him. I met him only once, but it's so shy and retiring in person. You know, I mean, just kind of, and you think of him as a performer, but not with a microphone, not with a camera on his face. It's through the puppets, you know. And we were talking about Andy and Don, but it became so clear, not even so much from the interview with Frank Oz, because he was very modest about his contributions, but as I began to recognize and look at these videos, what a comedy team they were.
Yes,
not just Bert and Ernie, but Miss Piggy. And Kermit, or there's a great bit in there with Fozzie and Kermit, and this is timing. I mean, it's like precision comedy timing, and they just nailed these bits.
Well, I think that's the thing: is good comedy is good comedy. So if you're making it for kids on PBS, or you're making it, for adults in a theater, good timing is good timing. That's why, I mean, I always got my timing from early on from Warner Brothers cartoons, because they were shown as shorts in theaters to adults. They weren't condescending.
Right.
So the timing was pitch perfect on those.
Yeah.
And then I think the same thing with when you look at a really good Sesame Street bit, it's just good.
Yeah.
There's no condescension of, this is funny for kids.
But I didn't realize how many of those bits that Jim directed. I just thought he brought the Muppets and performed, and they did that. And I didn't realize that all those bits that used to catch my attention when 3-year-old Bryce was watching them were the counting bits and these great little experimental things that would make me sit down and watch the show and kind of admire what was going on there and envy it a little bit. And I later realized, well, that was one of the reasons Jim did it, because he never wanted to do kids programming, but they said, bring the Muppets, but we'll also let you do your experimental films. But how about doing them for kids so that they can learn? And he had a son with severe learning disabilities, so that was something that he was clued into. And he was wouldn't you say that the reason it really worked at every level was that he was really a satirist, right?
Definitely.
It was always there.
What's interesting is that the early way that he made money was by making television commercials.
Right.
And so there are these Muppet commercials that, I don't know if you've seen them, but they're in black and white. And it's before anyone knew they were the Muppets, but you can tell it's the same, kind of almost the same characters, but they're prototypes. But they're doing like Hormel ham commercials.
Right.
But they're they last like 7 seconds long. But because they're 7 seconds long, they're very meta.
Right.
They're very today's sense of comedy.
Yeah.
They're not buy a Hormel ham. They're very weird and very funny by today's standards, and must have looked like very strange at the time.
And yet really popular.
Yeah.
So they really, really broke through. I mean, they were doing some kind of, there was almost always an explosion or a gunshot involved in a Hormel ham commercial somehow.
No, bacon, they're pretty much selling anything, but they're doing ads the way we, as part of the podcast, we do ads. And I always do them in my sensibility, my way, and then afterwards think no one's going to pay for that.
Right.
And they do.
Yeah.
And you can leave this in. I don't think they should, but they do. And Adam Sachs is going to take that out. But because they see the value of, we found out that they like that people listen to the ads.
Yeah. They were emotional without being sentimental. Definitely always had a point of view, and always had something to say, in and around the zaniness. But the Muppet Show, I didn't think about it. I loved watching it.
Yeah.
I didn't watch them, religiously, but man, I watch them now.
Yeah.
I mean, those episodes hold up. But I didn't realize that he was basically taking the English dance hall, sort of almost like vaudeville, their version, and applying that to the show.
So he was making them in England.
Yeah. So it's sort of, once again, what's old is new.
Yes.
When put through this filter.
You mentioned earlier, I knew Jim well, and I can't say I did. I met him on a few occasions, and he was really nice. And he actually once suggested that he had a show that probably never went, and it was towards the end of his life, but suggested that because people were always like, that Conan's got like a look or something.
Yeah.
He's irritating, but he's got a look. And Jim Henson suggested that I audition for something for one of his shows, and I think I remember they sent over. I've told this, but they sent over sides that had two actors,
right,
two characters, and I didn't know which one he wanted me to audition for.
Right.
So I showed up at and said to the woman who was running the audition, it says Steve and Mitch, and I don't know which is which. And she said, "Oh, here's the character breakdowns," and she handed me Steve, and it said, women want to be with him, men want to be him. He oozes sexuality. Blah, blah, blah. And I was just like deflating. And then I said, "Can I see the one for Mitch?" And she handed me Mitch. She was like, "This gangly, goofy, red-topped goon stumbles his way through life. But people like him despite his many flaws and his asexuality." And I went, "I think I'm the second guy." But this is a lovely tribute. And one of the things that really got to me is because of my connection, when Jim passed very suddenly in 1990, and it was such a shock because it was just out of nowhere. He gets this
53 years old.
53 years old. I was invited to that memorial, and to this day, it's the greatest send-off I've seen anybody have, because it's a funeral. It's a funeral mass. It's a memorial. Right. And it started with, I guess, a letter from Jim that he had written, which is like, well, if you're reading this, it must mean I'm gone.
Right.
And he just decided to write this in case he ever passed suddenly. And he did. And it was so lovely. And then all the characters come out, and we're all laughing and crying at the same time. Yeah. So you show footage of the memorial service, and I was there.
Yeah.
And I, to this day, have thought, that's what everyone should be like. It can't
Yes.
be, because we're not all Jim Henson,
Right,
but
right.
That's what it should be. It really should be a celebration.
Well, it clearly was, and his son Brian read that letter, and we have a bit of that in the.
Oh my God!
And it was a tremendous tribute and moment, but he's so loved.
Yeah,
I mean, everybody we interviewed, it was actually great to make a film that I thought was interesting, could be revealing, and actually just doesn't have a dark side. I mean, he literally was just a guy who lived in a positive light. And he struggled, ups and downs, difficulties on a personal side in the relationship, sure, and yet set such a great example.
Yes.
Like how you navigate that too.
Yep.
I mean, winning's easy. But when you struggle,
that
defines the man or the woman, and you look at both Jim and Jane, and you sort of say, well, that's we should do that.
Well, the documentary is a tonic. I would recommend just watch it, because you will laugh very hard, but it's also informative about so much more, and very apt that you're speaking about it, because I'm glad. You were the right guy to make this, because I think because you have just in every single decade of your life contributed good stuff, and I think who can say that?
Well,
that's really remarkable, and I'm so glad that you're here. I'm so glad I know you. I'm so glad you let me saw your arm off 30 years ago, and
we're still at it. We're still going strong.
At it. Yeah, let's do a leg. Yeah. Oh, I checked out his leg on the way in. That left one looks like it could go at any time. Anyway. Make sure Jim Henson, Idea Man, is just, it's a gift. And make sure that you check it out. And Ron Howard, you're a gift. Thanks so much for being here.
Great to be here.
And let's get together, get a drink, and talk sunscreen whenever you want.
Beautiful.
Hello, my name is Ron Chernow, and I feel very, very warmly about anyone who has won the Mark Twain Award for American Humor.
Oh, wow.
Including our friend Conan O'Brien. So
That's
it's
so
a
nice.
delight to be here.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
That's lovely. And that was one of the great. I mean, I've long been a Twain fan, and I'm a huge history buff. So that award meant the world to me, and all the people that turned out. It was just a lovely night. And
No, I saw in your resume, Conan, that you had studied history at Harvard, and I had studied literature at Yale. So you were in training for my career, and I was in training for your career.
I know. We want to switch.
History
you want to trade? You want to trade?
Sure.
I've noticed something, which is and other people have pointed it out as well, that you have written this string of spectacular biographies, and I congratulate you on the Mark Twain. I read all, I believe, 1,200 pages of this book and was enthralled. I love it, and I learned so much about Twain that I didn't know, because you've unearthed some amazing stuff about the man. And to see his life, I mean, it's very hard to contain this guy's life. And I think you have managed to do that brilliantly.
Thank
but I was
you.
looking at your work because I believe I have read all of your books, which I can't say to many people. Judy Blume, but it's you and Judy Blume. But there's an interesting path to the order in which you wrote, because you start out and you write about J.P. Morgan and this great Gilded Age industrialist, which then got you interested and whet your appetite for your next book, which is Rockefeller, which then got you interested in finance. And you think, I'll go back to the beginning, the source. Who's running finance in America at the very beginning? Well, Hamilton. You write that book, and I know your plan all along was for it to be a musical with a lot of rap.
People always say to me at events, Mr. Chernow, did you imagine as you were writing the book that it was going to end up as a hip-hop musical? And I always say, I think the question answers itself.
Yes. There is I'm sure you've seen it, but there's an amazing tape of Lin-Manuel Miranda. He's been invited to the White House to perform his latest work. This is obviously a bunch of years ago, 15 years ago or so. He's invited to the White House, to the Obama White House, to perform his latest work. And he gets up to the microphone and he says, I'm now going to perform, this is the President Obama and the First Lady are there and all these assembled people at the White House. And he says, I'm going to perform my latest work. It's a musical about Alexander Hamilton. Huge laugh. Huge laugh. And he goes, hold on. No, I'm serious. It sounded so absurd to people. And then, of course, it became one of the most...
No, in fact, with that song a few months earlier, he had come to my brownstone in Brooklyn Heights, and he sat on my couch and he started snapping his fingers, and he did the opening number of the of the song. And when he finished, he said, "What do you think?" I said, "Well, you've taken the first 40 pages of my book, and you've condensed it into a 4-minute song." And I said, "That's rather amazing." But what I was thinking, and I didn't say to him, I said, "This is kind of embarrassing that it took me 40 pages to say what this guy, has done in 4 minutes." And then a few months later, he said, "Go on YouTube. I performed it at the White House, So there he is, not only performing it at the White House, but he got a standing ovation from Barack and Michelle Obama." And I thought to myself, I'm really strapped to a rocket with this guy. He's written one song in the show, and he's already performed it at the White House and gotten a standing ovation from the President and First Lady.
I loved when I went to see the play on Broadway, and it's in the initial run. I went into, and it's the hottest ticket in town, and I go to see it, and I walk into the lobby, and prominently displayed is your biography, Hamilton by Ron Chernow, is right there, and it's like, it's what any historian would dream of. Do you know what I mean? That, and I know you are disappointed that your book on Grant did not become a hip hop musical. But Hamilton leads to Washington. Washington leads to Grant. And I mentioned this to you out in the hallway. I love the Grant biography because the most shocking thing to me that I had never appreciated before about Grant, and I thought I knew about these guys. He goes to West Point. He serves in fights in Mexico. He's in the Mexican-American War, and he's tries his hand at business, and it's really not going well for him. And the Civil War is approaching, but as the Civil War is almost upon us, he is carrying and delivering firewood, like chopping it and delivering it to people in the cold to make enough money to put food on his family's table. And then he decides to go sign up for the war. And the period of time between him chopping wood and carrying it around to people's homes door to door, and him being the most celebrated general in the biggest war in the history of the world, is about 2 years.
No, it's the most
It's
improbable
insane.
story. Yeah, and
And then 2 years later, he's next to Lincoln. He's the most famous man in America.
Absolutely. One of the things that attracted me to the grand story was that I felt that all the people that I had written about up until that point were kind of built for success. I mean, you read about the early years of Alexander Hamilton. He has a focus, a discipline, a drive, intelligence. If he didn't do what, he ended up doing, he would have succeeded at something. Whereas,
Washington, a very impressive guy, even had the Revolutionary War not come along, he's still a very impressive, capable.
Yeah, and even John D. Rockefeller, when he's, a young clerk on the Cleveland docks, he said, I was after something big. Whereas, 100 pages into Ulysses S. Grant, you figure this guy's going to end up a footnote in history at best. And so I was attracted to the idea of writing about failure. I had written about so much success. And after all, as we all know, life is much more about failure for most of us, than success. And so, with Grant, suddenly the Civil War comes along. He had West Point. He'd been in the Mexican War. He stood out all this military lore in his head, but he's working in his father's leather goods store in Galena, Illinois, where he's working as a clerk junior to his two younger brothers. You can imagine how that felt. The war breaks out. There's a tremendous shortage, particularly in the North, of, trained officers. And he suddenly meshes with his historical moment, and then he rises and rises and rises. But he's almost 40 at that point. He could easily have ended up living a life of total, obscurity instead. And I think this is one of the things that inspired a lot of people reading the story. We all feel that we have something special inside of us, if only the right set of circumstances, happens. And Grant is kind of the greatest example of that.
He is. It's if you saw it in a movie, you'd say, well, we got to fix that part. Because the fact that you have him chopping wood and delivering it door to door and maybe getting a nickel for his trouble, and him saying, thank you very much, and moving on to the next house. And then he's a celebrated war hero 2 years later in the most consequential, war of that century, if I can say that. It's astounding. It's absolutely astounding. Today we're here to talk about Mark Twain. You've written, I've been waiting for this book because I've made my life in humor, for better or worse, and Twain is the American humorist, and he comes from this era that fascinates me. And I was saying this to someone the other day, Twain has been turned into kind of an emoji, the white suit, the cigar, the aphorisms that we see all over the place on coffee mugs and everything, and kind of a lovable, emoji, for lack of a better word. And this book shows you that his life is, it's an epic life. It's uniquely American life. He does so much, and he travels such a far distance. I don't mean he does it, obviously in miles. He circumnavigates the globe. But I mean, just from what he started as and what he became is infinite, and it's all in one lifetime. And then he has so many contrasts, and I wanted to talk about some of those. He's born in the South, and he identifies as, he is a Southerner.
Yeah.
He is a Southerner, and he has, as a kid and as a young man, he has all of the antebellum Southern beliefs.
Yeah, he's born into a slave-holding family in a slave-owning town in a slave-owning state. Okay, he's born in Hannibal, which is tucked all the way up into the northeast corner of Missouri. It's right on the Mississippi River. So it's, then and now rather isolated rural area, except here is this broad shining, magnificent waterway that's kind of bringing once or twice a day, the world through Hannibal, and pouring off those steamboats. Might be circus players, it might be traveling salesmen, it might be a minstrel show, whatever. He sees the whole world passing through him, and it kind of begins to give him an intimation of a wider world. But you're right. I mean, going through his letters, when he's a teenager, not only statements kind of crude and racist about, blacks, but Chinese, I mean, you name it.
Yeah.
And this man grows an inconceivable amount in the course of his life, from growing up in this, small town backwater, and he has all the prejudices, of the general environment, and he becomes so much more enlightened and tolerant a figure.
I tried to touch on this in the, you get to give quick remarks at the end at the Twain Prize, and I tried to touch on this, which is by the end of his life, his views have evolved so much, and he is living in this age of imperialism. He's living this age when Americans are getting really excited about, we're going to pretty much control the Caribbean. We're going to take over the Philippines. We're going to take the Sandwich Islands. We're going to take Hawaii. We're going to expand. And Twain is saying, I don't like this. And it's very unpopular. And he's very much against all of the 19th century racism towards Chinese. He's very progressive. He has a lot of views that are completely evolved from how he grew up.
Yeah, it's interesting because he fairly early on becomes America's most popular and beloved humorist. And he recognizes that it's something of a trap. He's always afraid of kind of alienating his readers, particularly alienating his Southern readers, because he had very, very strong, views on not just politics, religion, and a lot of other things. But as his life goes on, I really feel by the end of his life, he's become the conscience of American society, that he's dared to articulate all of those things that he was afraid to say. And I think that part of his power is he says things that all of us are thinking but won't say out loud. And you mentioned his views on imperialism, because at the beginning of the Spanish-American War, he's actually very much on the side of the U.S. He feels that we're defending these, Cuban rebels against their Spanish overlords, and we take over the Philippines. And he, again, idealistically imagines that we're going to liberate, rather than subjugate the Philippine people. And he gets up at a dinner in New York. He was very often the toastmaster. He was kind of the perfect person to host a banquet. And he gets up there and he says that our soldiers in the Philippines are marching with disgraced muskets under a polluted flag. Well, we all know, because we've all lived through wars, we know how difficult it is to criticize your own government in your own country.
During a war.
During a war, and people in the audience gasped. And in fact, another, one of the organizers of this event immediately rushed up to the podium and said, no, our soldiers are not, marching with disgraced muskets under a polluted flag. And, increasingly as he goes on, he's willing to take the heat. He's willing to make the enemies. And one of the many interesting things about doing this book is we all like to think as people get older, they become more mellow in their views. Twain becomes more rabid in his rage, and he's not only taking on America and the Philippines, he's writing pamphlets against the Russian Tsar. He's writing pamphlets against King Leopold II of Belgium for his behavior in the Congo Free State. He's campaigning against municipal corruption in New York. He's writing pamphlets defending the Jews. He's speaking out in favor of women's suffrage, et cetera, et cetera.
There's also his, what's it called? He wrote a article or pamphlet, United States of Lynchdom. Was it?
Yes.
And he was very much, he was taking on topics no one wanted to talk about. Lynching in the Jim Crow South, and he would talk about it.
Yeah, that was actually, on so many things he became outspoken. That was one where he finally drew back, because originally he was collecting a lot of clippings about lynchings in the United States, including in his own town Hannibal, and he had originally planned and proposed to his publisher that he was going to do a history of lynching in the United States. He ends up writing an essay, The United States of Lynchdom, which unfortunately did not get published during his lifetime. It was published 13 years after he died. And what he writes is that he tries to analyze the psychology of lynch mobs. And he says that it's really just kind of a few sadistic individuals who are instigating the crowd. And he says that most of the people are cowards who are coerced into it. I don't know if that's true. I say in the book, actually, when you look at photos of a lot of lynchings, it seems like there are a lot of smiling faces, of whites in the crowd. That turned out that was kind of one topic that was a bridge too far for him to do.
But I do think he was he was looking ahead to, I think he'd be aghast at the collective thinking of the news media now, the internet, how people love to groupthink. Groupthink is, he's talking about all these things.
There's so many places where he's talking about groupthink. He actually has a very interesting essay called Cornpone Ideas. And what he says, and I keep thinking about this with our own contemporary politics, that we have two sets of ideas. We have our secret and sincere positions on things, and then we have the positions that we take publicly for the sake of our own safety. He said that kind of life makes cowards of us all, the need to support our families. We're afraid to voice things. He also felt that, politically, we all like to imagine that we're voicing original ideas, when in fact he said, 99% of the time we are voicing ideas that we picked up from party leaders, from party organs, that we're kind of parroting things.
Well, now we have that. We have that. We have that over and over and over again now with everyone spouts what they just heard on either CNN or Fox, or that they saw on the internet, and it becomes their opinion. Twain is talking about so many things that relate to today. And there's a couple of things that absolutely fascinate me about this guy is that you use the words to describe him glandular and volcanic. There's something driving this guy from an early age that you could almost think would show up on a CAT scan as like, oh, I see. There was a growth pressing on the occipital lobe. And there's something going on with this guy that yields him greatness and also terrible folly. He is obsessive. He is nonstop. I've never read about an author who churned out so much. When he got writing, he would say, he would just sometimes standing up, sometimes writing at the billiards table, sometimes in his little octagonal writing room. He'd churn out, chapter after chapter after chapter, and go on these streaks of writing that when he turns it on, when it hits him, he's doing that till the end of his life. He's so prolific to an almost crazy degree. That would be enough, but he's also he's traveling as pretty much the world's first stand-up, not the world's first, but a stand-up comic as we would know it today.
Yeah.
He's a very much in-demand speaker. Yeah. He's traveling everywhere. He's also getting into insane money-making schemes. Mark Twain, he has an idea for a board game. It's the Mark Twain memory game. He has ideas for a book that self-pastes for when you put in clippings. All of them bomb. And the sad thing is he really gets involved in this printing press, this settable type press that he thinks, the page press that he thinks is going to revolutionize the world, and he ruins not only his fortune, but his wife's inherited fortune. They lose everything on this idea, and he can't let it go like a gambler in Vegas. And so he is so good at seeing the flaws in other people. He's so good at seeing the vanity in other people. And then he goes off and does the stupidest things you can imagine. Again, you just think he's driven. he can't stop himself in good ways and in bad ways.
Yeah, he writes a letter at one point to his family. He says they have to move, exclamation point. And there is something driving him. I mean, one of many contradictions of Mark Twain is he always described himself as lazy. But, we know Tom and Huck in the Mississippi, he published 24 books in his lifetime, somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 magazine articles, filled up 50 notebooks, gave thousands of interviews, gave thousands of speeches. And I, of course, had to go through, all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and he was very aware of his own nature. He said, my emotions veer from one extreme to another.
Yeah. Would you suspect, Today, someone would say, you need to go see a psychopharmacologist. Most great men in history would probably be told, you need to be on Prozac.
Yeah.
Maybe let's put a little lithium in your coffee. Let's do something.
Yeah, and it was interesting because there were a lot of characteristics. He was, he claimed that he was lazy, but then he would go through kind of this hyper-focused period. He could be very scattered and disorganized, particularly before he met his wife, who really cleaned up his act.
Livy,
People would walk into his room and there would be, scraps of writing everywhere. There'd be, pipes and cigars everywhere. It would be a complete mess. I did describe this to a psychiatrist friend who immediately said, what attention deficit disorder. I try not to use contemporary psychological language. It seems inappropriate to project that, back onto the past.
No.
But there's something like that, that's clearly going on. But I got very fascinated by the business investments. In fact, at one point in the book, I said it was sometimes hard to tell whether Mark Twain was a literary man with business sidelines or a businessman with literary sidelines. That, he said, I have to speculate, such being my nature. He admits late in his life, after he's lost several fortunes, he said, I was always the easy prey of the cheap adventurer. And there was something very, very compulsive about the speculation, because the tragedy of this story is, here is a man who made a fortune in book royalties. He made a fortune in lecture fees. He marries an heiress from upstate New York.
To a coal fortune.
Coal and rail and timber. They're living in a 25-room mansion in Hartford with 6 servants. He blows his own fortune. He blows Livy's inheritance. They're forced into exile to economize in Europe for 9 years.
Because it's cheaper to live in Europe.
Cheaper to live in Europe, but still, they're living like in a 28-room villa in Florence to quote unquote economize.
Yeah.
They're living in
There's no Airbnb.
There's no Airbnb.
And shout out to Airbnb, by the way. You guys do a great job. Sponsor.
Then they're living in a very lavish suite of hotel rooms in Vienna. In fact, they go on one trip to Europe, and they buy so many objects to beautify their house in Hartford that they come back with 12 crates and 25 boxes of things. They were like the original consumers. And Livy was usually the restraining force on Twain's worst excesses. But she herself was the original, shopper. And she wrote a very beautiful letter to her mother at one point and said, it's terrible how attached we become to material things. So here was, a couple who should have had a lovely, placid life, that everything in the world. He had talent. He was making an enormous amount of money. He'd married into an enormous amount
He's
of
probably
money.
the most famous person in America.
Most famous, and actually the most famous American, in the world.
In the world, yeah.
Yeah. But, particularly in the United States, he was so fascinated that if he walked into a restaurant and theater, everyone would stand up and applaud. He was that famous.
Well,
instantly.
It happens.
When does it happen?
What's that?
When does it happen?
Sona calls ahead.
Okay, I see.
And she says, Conan's going to be there soon.
Yeah.
And you each get $25.
Okay. Hired actors.
Yeah. I've always believed that your home should be an expression of who you are. I have that tattooed on my low back. I could have had so many things tattooed down there, and that's what I chose.
Down there.
Yeah. Anyway, whether you're redecorating a single space or furnishing your entire home, Ashley has styles that balance timeless appeal and modern trends to bring your personal look home. You don't want it to look like someone else decorated your home.
Yeah.
Ashley offers, good job, Sona. Ashley offers, don't know how I do it without you. Ashley offers well-crafted, affordable pieces built to stand up to real life, not phony pretend life. They offer fast, reliable white glove delivery right to your door.
Nice.
Ding dong, hello. Hey, what are you guys wearing white gloves for? We're here from Ashley. Whoa, you guys are wearing white gloves. That's right. We said white glove service. You sure did. You guys kept your promise. Visit your local Ashley store or head to ashley.com to find your style.
The problems are self-inflicted wounds.
Oh, all of it is self-inflicted.
Yeah.
And there are these contradictions, which is he's a Southerner who becomes obsessed with living in the North, in Hartford, among all the most Northern liberal elites.
Yeah.
The Tony, the Yankees, the writers. So he does that. He makes that transformation where he becomes the most Northern of Northerners. He hated Gilded Age millionaires, desperately wanted to be one, and did everything he could to be wealthy. He had a publishing house, the typesetting machine, these crazy board games. All of it fails. But he's this kind, generous. There's so many stories of his kindness, his generosity, his sweetness of nature. Yet when he decided to turn on you, forget it. He was, his rage knew no bounds, and the language that he used when he decided, I mean, these are people who you said, like, this is the greatest person I've ever met. This Matt Gourley is the greatest person I've ever met. I love Matt Gourley. I love, he's great. He's my best friend. I love him. He's fantastic. And then, and I've experienced this, one little,
can we just end here?
No,
Yeah.
Just please.
you can edit this for yourself and
clip
play
that
it.
out. Yeah.
No, but then whatever the friend did that he decided was, some kind of breach or lapse or that snake, that monster, that lower than low, and he couldn't contain himself. There was no gray area. There was no gray area.
He couldn't get it out of his system. When he was a young writer in San Francisco, he was about the same age as Bret Hart. Remember Bret Hart, the Outcast of Poker Plaza?
Yep. Who was the celebrity at the time.
Who was the celebrity at the time, and who Mark Twain thought was the most celebrated, maybe the greatest, writer of the time. They became very, very close friends. They later collaborated on a play, and Bret Hart was having money difficulties, came and lived in Mark Twain's house in Hartford. He said things about the house that Mark Twain didn't like. He said things about Livy, the wife that Twain didn't like. And Mark Twain then turned on him. He would fall in love with people, and then he would become severely disillusioned so that, he finally says of Bret Hart, he never had an idea that he came by honestly.
Yeah.
He said that he was a man without a country. No, that's too strong a term. He was an invertebrate without a country.
Oh,
Yeah.
snap. Burn.
And there was no one who was better at put downs than Mark Twain. But Conan, one of the things that I could not figure out about him, we all have these experiences with people where we're suddenly disillusioned with them.
Yeah.
And maybe to tell them off. But when we do tell them off, it gets it out of our system, and then we sort of calm down and we move on with our life. Mark Twain would not let it go.
Yeah.
And if you can't let it go, the one who's going to end up, being victimized by it is not the other person. It's going to be
it's you that's
it's
carrying
kind of like
it.
this wound that he keeps probing again and again and again. I could not figure out. I don't know if any psychiatrist could figure out. I mean, he's late in life. He's very disillusioned with the two most important people working for him, a man named Ralph Ashcroft and a woman named Isabel Lyon, who was his private secretary. When he becomes disillusioned with them, he ends up writing a 400-page manuscript, and he says about Isabel, who had been his...
He is so close to her.
Yeah.
And she becomes really important after he loses his wife. This is someone who cared for him, took care of him, and then he writes this 400-page...
She was like this surrogate
screed about how awful she is.
She
diss track.
was a brute, a simple, heartless
a
brute.
diss track.
She was an
It's
insect.
like he's
She
like
was a
Kendrick
reptile.
Lamar. Of the,
Yeah, well, he
back
also
in the
hated
day.
Drake. He also hated Drake, which is your next biography is of Drake.
Oh, he can wrap your story as
You
well.
can wrap your story there. You heard it here first. Ron Chernow's 1,800-page biography of Drake is going to drop in a year. But you know what's so funny is if you ask people for the sort of the quick concept, Mark Twain, again, you think of the mustache, you think of this sweetness, sort of a slouch, grumpy, the cigar, but all these funny, cranky comments. And it can all seem, Tom Sawyer, Huck Finn, gliding down the river. And then you look at later in life and there's so much tragedy. I mean, they lose this fortune. He has one daughter who is very ill. Trying to think, Jean has epilepsy.
Epilepsy, yeah.
And it's terrible. Susie, when they've left the country, she's wandering around their mansion, which is shut down, alone, and she had meningitis, and she pretty much dies almost
She's
alone.
Raving, yeah.
While the family is in Europe. It's very tragic. Twain's wife is very sick. He's constantly beset by these money troubles, people suing him, trying to get the money back. And he does something that's really stunning. Today we live in this world where people declare bankruptcy. They'll give you 1 penny on the dollar, and then they start another business venture. Yeah. Not naming names here, but plenty of people who take advantage of this system. Mark Twain, it was very important to Mark Twain and his wife Livy that when they had to declare bankruptcy, this publishing house collapsed that they had created, and they owed a lot of money, and they swore that they would pay everybody back every single penny. And then at an advanced age, he starts this world tour, and I couldn't do a tour like this. I have tons of energy. I'm a lot healthier and younger. I could not do what he did. He goes at this time, when it was difficult to travel, he goes everywhere in the world to raise the money to pay everybody back. And he didn't have to do that.
Yeah, and he's suffering terribly from carbuncles. It was really grueling for him to do it. But particularly, Livy felt that there was this terrible stigma attached to bankruptcy. And for her, it was a real question of honor. Yeah. And in fact, the eldest daughter, Susie, who died at 24 of bacterial meningitis, when they finally paid off the last of the debts, Livy writes that the happiest day that she'd had since her daughter died was the day that they paid off the last of the creditors. In fact, there's an interesting moment. Twain became very good friends with the Standard Oil mogul named Henry Rogers. And Rogers is kind of running rings around the creditors. He was a very, very shrewd Wall Street operator.
He was helping Twain out.
Yeah, he was helping Twain out. And Twain, in New York, writes very proudly to Livy, who was then in Paris, describing the way that Rogers handled the creditors. And Livy writes back, she said, "I'm upset by the way we're handling the creditors." She really felt that they owed the creditors, and they should be treating the creditors with much more dignity and respect. But it's an amazing story because it did take several years to pay off the debts. But what amazed me, Conan? Okay, so he goes through this terrible, grueling. It was a 12 or 13-month round the world tour, and then they're living in Vienna, and he discovers that there is this patent for a new process for printing on carpets and textiles and tapestries.
After everything he's been through. He hears about this new invention.
He goes to the American consulate, and he spends a day reading up on this industry. He's known nothing about this before. After 24 hours, he's convinced that he's the world's leading authority on this. And he writes a letter to his friend Henry Rogers, who is one of the main moguls of Standard Oil. And he suggests that they buy up the worldwide patents. The device was called the raster. Said we should buy the worldwide patents for this. He said people will call it a trust, this global monopoly. They will have but we mustn't mind that. People will talk, but that's okay. And so he's gone from knowing nothing about this to suddenly imagining that he's going to be the head of a global
he really
monopoly.
He wanted to be, what today we would call a billionaire. He wanted to be a billionaire. He wanted to be a financial whiz, which is so crazy because it's what he loved to make fun of. But it's also what he wanted to be. And the second half of his life, or actually the last couple of acts of his life, to me, he is so disillusioned and so dark. And we think of Twain, again, I keep coming back to this, that we think of him as this charming, the Twain you see on stage in one-man shows is just this fun scamp and rascal and, the old riverboat pilot who's got his stories. And in the end, he is so dark and he's questioning everything.
Yeah, no, he says that anyone who's not a pessimist is a damn fool. He actually says there was no life ever worth living.
Life was worth living.
Was worth living. And he was asked if he would like to live his life all over again. He said, I would like to relive my youth and then drown myself. He made this statement that the only gift that God gave to the race was youth. He felt that everything else, after that was bitterness and disappointment. And he's always kind of pining for this lost paradise of his youth, which is why he wrote so powerfully about Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn, which of course has, much darker tones to it. But it's a bit of a paradox because he had this adoring wife. He could not have had a better, wife than Livy.
And she read everything Twain wrote and would temper him. Maybe not. But she would remove if she thought anything was a little, it's a little racy, or that language is a little. You don't say breeches. You're talking about underwear. Let's take that out. So
she was very genteel.
She was very genteel, which is a very funny. They were an odd couple in that way, but she was a great partner.
Yeah, and actually, one of the interesting, parts of the story is Twain said when they first met that Twain was a mighty coarse, rough, customer. And she took this this man, and she really, because he'd come from this little, backwater town, she made him presentable in polite society, and he really didn't know how to do it. She helped him with what we would today call anger management. He had a terrible temper, so he would very often, if he was angry, he would sit down and he would write a very, impetuous note telling somebody off, and she trained him when he did that not to send a letter, but to stash it in the drawer and wait a few days, and then when he would cool off. And I can't tell you, Conan, how many letters there are, in his archives, where the morning after a dinner party, he would write to someone who'd been at the dinner party, the madam tells me that I might have been a little brusque and sharp at dinner last night, and I really didn't intend to offend you. In fact, the daughters laughingly called this mother dusting father off.
Yeah.
In fact, it reached the point where they had this system of cards at a dinner table. So a red card flashed to Mark Twain meant, are you going to monopolize that woman sitting on your right the whole time? A blue card meant, are you going to sit back and not say anything the entire dinner? So she's kind of guiding him.
These are soccer penalties.
Yeah, these are soccer penalties.
We have those cards for Conan during these conversations too.
Take it easy, Conan.
Wrap it up.
Yeah.
But in fact, he said, because he said Livy edited my manuscripts and then she edited me.
Yeah,
and she kind of really gave him a life. And in many ways, she was a long-suffering wife. He loses her inheritance.
Yeah.
We have extensive correspondence between them. She never threw it in his face.
He apologizes a lot. Another word I wrote down after, when I was reading the book, I wrote down guilt.
Yeah.
He has so much guilt,
yeah.
Today about, he convinces his brother to become a steamboat captain. He says, this is great. I love doing this.
Yeah.
And his brother's then killed in an explosion of a steamboat. And so Twain blames himself. Twain blames himself for so many things. When his daughter dies, he's not there. he's, because he's trying to raise money and because he's lost all the money. So he blames himself for that. And you just think of almost like Marley and Dickens. He's got these chains of guilt that he's carrying around with him that go back to early childhood. That and somehow he's fighting against that.
No, you're absolutely. I mean, the saddest one is that he and Libby, their first child, was a boy who was named Langdon, which was her maiden name. And Langdon died at 18 months. And what happened was that they were at the Langdon, place in Elmira, New York. And one chilly morning in May, they went out driving, and Twain felt that he had not wrapped the baby up enough in this chilly weather. And they came back, and the baby had a cold. But then the baby recovered, and they went to Hartford. And after they went to Hartford, the baby died of diphtheria. Mark Twain told William Dean Howells, who was his closest literary friend, he said, "I killed Langdon." He was convinced that ride in the carriage,
when it was emphatically not that.
Emphatically not the case, yeah. In fact, his sister-in-law, Sue Crane, afterwards said, they left Elmira and went to Hartford because the baby was better. The baby was fine. So he had this tendency to flagellate himself, and take responsibility. And it was really kind of crazy, what happened with Susie, the eldest daughter, that he was not, there at the time. They had just come back from this round-the-world tour. There was no cure for meningitis at the time. His being there would not really have helped matters. And in fact, she was sort of delirious and raving.
It's really, it's Shakespearean. He's built this massive house, which is, by the way, you can go see it.
Yeah, it's still there.
And it's
beautiful.
Absolutely beautiful, kind of almost garish. It's like this insane, someone said it looks like it's a steamboat. Or
cross between a steamboat and a cuckoo clock.
Yeah, but you would go crazy for it. It's the kind of thing you and I would tour and go crazy for. And it's not unlike Theodore Roosevelt's house in Oyster Bay, this just big, long thing that people built back then, massive, huge ceilings, lots of flourishes, lots of different colored stone and brick.
Yeah.
But that was their joy. I think they lived there for 17 years.
17 years, that's right.
And then they have to leave it because they can't afford to live there. They banish themselves to Europe. And then, of course, she's there at some point alone, wandering around dying, going from room to room, and all the furniture is covered up with blankets. And you're just like, oh my God, this is, the sadness that he endures in the later part of his life, it's just like a boxer being hit over and over and over again. And then
it's interesting, because he's a novelist, and I think that he himself becomes a character perhaps greater than any of his creations. I think the life he lives is a story actually more dramatic than any that he created, and it's full of light and shadow because it's full of literary triumphs, to be sure, full of personal calamities. And, I haven't had a chance to tell you just how much I loved your speech that you gave for the Mark Twain Award, because I think that I was so glad just the tone of it, because Mark Twain was much more than just a humorist. He was a sage. He was a moralist. He was an activist. He was a conscience of the person. And I think that, you really touched on that, very, very exactly. But it's interesting because we know Mark Twain as a humorist, and we tend to think of him with the white suit and the cigar. But Mark Twain said a couple of things about life. He said, life is a tragedy with comedy distributed here and there only to heighten and magnify the pain by contrast.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
And then he also said that life is a fever dream with sweetness embittered by sorrow and pleasure poisoned by pain. I know you're all going to go off and jump off a bridge after, tell you these comments that he made,
you have this quote, and this, I underlined a few things in the book because it's this later parts that really got to me. At the end of his life, he's pretty much saying, I didn't do any of this. this was not, you can't think of a more self-made man.
Yeah.
There's Lincoln, there's Twain, there's a couple of like great self-made people who just comes from absolute, nothing and is this force of nature. And you think, well, he really made himself. And at the end of his life, he's saying, it was just impulses, urges. I just did things and now here I am and now my life's over and it all meant nothing. I mean, that's kind of his philosophy. You said this here. In his work, he thought he bravely said what he knew to be true, but hadn't dared to voice, that the mind is a machine, that we mistake instinct for original thought, that free will is a farce, that our lives are predetermined by outside forces, and that all acts are selfishly motivated. And it's funny, that struck a chord with me because in the last couple of years, I've had this thought that's just been rattling around my head where people have said, hey, you've been around for a while and you've done some cool things. And I think, I didn't do any of it. I don't know why the fuck, sorry for the language, but Sona does the writing.
I've heard the language.
I'm so fucking sorry. Yeah,
please, Mr. Chernow, I apologize. Sona writes these things for me.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
And I'm not going to say this other stuff.
Would you please substitute it with breeches?
Yeah. But, in my own opinion, I think I can't explain any of it. I just have had these crazy impulsive drives and impulses, and maybe it is glandular. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, what did I do? I don't know what I did, but and certainly it's 1/1,000,000th of what Twain did. But it's funny that at the end of his life, he won't take credit for anything, and he thinks that we're all just in the void. He's very...
Yeah, he has this kind of deterministic view that we're just kind of, machines and they're stimuli and we react to it, that we're really not creating anything. The funny thing is, Conan, that someone reading that, if it had not been written by Mark Twain, they would have said, well, what about Mark Twain? Mark Twain would have been, the best example of the fact that there is true originality in the world. But he felt that even Shakespeare, and that's kind of a whole other thing.
Oh, yeah, he has this whole obsessive... He's obsessed with the idea that Shakespeare didn't write any of it, that it was all Francis Bacon.
Yeah, he actually gets up after
and can't let that go.
Oh no, he can't let it go. Yeah, and he gets up after he's watching a performance of Romeo and Juliet with a friend, and he gets up at the end and he says to the friend, "That was the best thing Francis Bacon ever wrote." He was convinced that his discovery that Francis Bacon had written it, said it's the great discovery of the age.
Also, I couldn't help but wonder if it was a little bit of professional jealousy. Like, there's no way that guy did all that.
He loved the play, and I think what misled him is that as Mark Twain became famous, reporters were constantly flocking to Hannibal, Missouri, and other places that he had lived. So, like everyone who ever knew Mark Twain was interviewed 25 times, and he couldn't figure out why there wasn't that same kind of trove, of anecdotes, and why weren't the people in Stratford telling all these stories about
if Shakespeare was doing all this, why weren't they writing? Why aren't there the anecdotes about? There's so many anecdotes about me. There'd be that many anecdotes about Shakespeare, and you're like, well, no, it was a different time. It
was a different media environment, and his life was covered so extensively, with the kind of a handful of stories about Shakespeare. But if Shakespeare lived in a different media environment, we would know everything about him. But so, Mark Twain wrongly extrapolated from it to Elizabethan times, but he actually wrote this book called "Is Shakespeare Dead?" that he thought was going to, set the world on fire. It didn't. He also thought that John Bunyan had not written Pilgrim's Progress. He thought John Milton was, but
maybe he didn't write his own works. And he's just projecting.
This is his guilt.
Yes.
It was all Livy. It was all Livy, his wife cranking it out.
It was Bret Hart.
Yeah, Bret Hart did it all. No, he was dead. But I just, it's funny. I think if Twain were alive today, he'd be on the internet. He would be into every conspiracy. He'd be, and also talk about a guy who you'd have to keep away from an infomercial, any pop-up ad, anything. And Twain would be like, I've got to have the abdominizer. Why, that's the darn tootinest. That's the best invention I've ever, and Livy would be there saying, you bought 10,000 abdominizers? You know what I mean? I've got to have those gels in my shoes. A sneaker you can just step into? I've got to have it. But I mean, you could just
shake weight. I gotta have the shake weight.
I gotta have the shake weight. And
I got a gel like Magellan.
I like the way that rolls off the tongue. But he would just fall prey to the word would get around soon. This is the guy, as it does, as these programs start to know, oh, this sucker is, they're on to me, they know that I like, like a new kind of leather wallet that has like a little, they're on to me. So I'm just constantly bombarded with a new way a little travel gizmo. I'm constantly being bombarded with those because the algorithm figures it out. They would have figured out Twain.
Well, I'm so curious if you were alive today, if I can get to ask you
if I was alive today,
that with Mark Twain, there was just no filter whatsoever. There was no kind of political correctness. He really felt as a satirist that everything was fair game. So that, for instance, when he wrote his first book, which turned out to be his best-selling book, called The Innocents Abroad, he went with these tourists, kind of early tourist cruise to Europe and the Holy Land, and he's just sounding off on all these things there in Italy. And he's making jokes about dwarves. Yeah, he said, if you want to see, dwarfs retail, go to Milan. If you want to see dwarves wholesale, go to Genoa. Yes, all of these different things. Well, no one today would dare to make these sorts of jokes, and he really felt that the whole world was his, field for humor. And I wonder how he would function today. Where we're much more sensitive, about offending different groups.
Well, I mean, I think it's a really interesting area because, as you know, you talk about it a lot in your book, Huck Finn is very controversial. Yeah. On one hand, Ernest Hemingway said the American literature begins with Huck Finn. Yeah. And many great writers have said that is the first great, truly great original American creative novel. And then, but it's got the N-word in it countless times. Yet it also is exploring a real relationship between Jim and Huck, and Jim is not a cardboard character. And the N-word is part of the dialect of that time. But for that reason, a lot of people say it should be banned, it shouldn't be read, or the word should be removed. And you think, if he were alive today, he'd be canceled for things he did when he's 20 years old. I mean, in his personal correspondence, when he's writing about race, before he's evolved. And that, when I was reading that, I was thinking, we live in this era now where, kids go online and do things, say things, and they get tagged. Yeah. Like, you're the kid who said that. You're the kid that did this. You're the kid that sang that. You're the kid. And I don't know, there wouldn't be a Mark Twain. He couldn't exist in a world that's keeping account where anyone can say, wait a minute, we just found something in your personal correspondence or in a speech you gave when you were 25. You're canceled. You're done.
Yeah, Mark Twain is a type of writer almost inconceivable today. He had no inhibitions. He felt no need to have any inhibitions.
Although he was puritanical about sex.
Very puritanical about sex.
Which I totally get. Yeah. And it's only late in life that he starts to kind of, that's another thing you bring up in the book, and I don't know that we have the time to go into it, but it's a facet of his life. Late in life, he is hanging around a lot of young women. When I say young women, ages what, like
10 to 16.
10 to 16. And what's interesting about it is that there's no evidence that there was anything sexual about it. Right. No one, and he was depressed. I'm not making excuses because it was Strange. Everyone noticed it.
Yeah.
What did he call them? He called them
His angelfish.
His angelfish.
Oh, God.
And so he's having, and to the point where his wife and his kids are saying they're trying to suppress any of the information. If there's a write up, he doesn't want the young kids around. But there is no evidence that it was anything other than him playing pool with them and liking to have them around because he loved the attention of, first of all, he was fascinated with childhood. He loved having the attention of these young women who kind of adored him.
Yeah.
So, but it is kind of pathological.
Yeah, no, absolutely. This is kind of a good
And who knows?
example
I don't know. It could have
kind of the difference between things were perceived then and now, because he collects, and that was the term that he used, that he collected a dozen of these girls. He called them his angelfish. They became members of his aquarium club.
But they would come over with their mom or their dad or their governess.
He was very careful to incorporate the mothers, the grandmothers into this. There was nothing secretive. He actually flaunted it. Actually, one of the girls, Dorothy Quick, he met on a transatlantic liner. And when it docked in New York, there would always be, a scrum of reporters waiting for Mark Twain in New York. And he gets off the boat with this 11-year-old girl. And the next day, newspapers across the country, the headlines are, Mark Twain captive of little girl, and people found this a very kind of charming and
avuncular.
Oh, Mark Twain, he's written beautiful books about American children. Of course, he loves it. So far from being secretive about it, he flaunted it. And in fact, I tell the story in the book that one of his friends, who was a famous actress, came to dinner one day dressed as a 12-year-old girl, with kind of buttons and bows and everything, because she wanted to be one of his angelfish. So this is the way it was kind of handled. People were reacting in this kind of very jovial way to it. Whereas we look at this behavior now, and it's, very disturbing,
It's
very odd and disquieting. He never acted on it. It's very different. When I was doing the research, I read a book about, Lewis Carroll. In the case of Lewis Carroll, where superficially might seem similar, but Lewis Carroll, collected nude photos and nude drawings of the girls. There was nothing like that with Twain. What the underlying dynamic was, I really don't know. But he had kind of enough control over himself. But he would read aloud to them. They would play pool together. He did announce during his last 3-4 years of life, he said, I've worked hard enough in my life. I just now want to play, So it was like kind of a second childhood. But it's really strange and weird. I'm not here to defend it at all. It's really kind of very creepy. And I think that everyone who reads the book will have that reaction to it. But I also kind of have to describe in fairness to him, what it was and it wasn't.
That is one of the things that I really love about the book is you're like Twain, you're not afraid to go everywhere. You're not afraid to look at everything.
Yeah. You're
clearly awed and impressed by this guy. You are also, you're exploring every nook and cranny. He was fallible. When I keep saying people like to think of him as this emoji, he was a great, I'm thinking of people like Lyndon Johnson who embodied greatness, but their flaws are also great. That, which has been so well documented by Caro.
You had a wonderful line in your Kennedy Center speech. You said, talked about the colossal mess of being human, that's kind of what Twain is about. He was once asked how he knew so much about human nature because he traveled a lot. He'd met a lot of people. He said, no, I look into myself. He felt that every human being has all of nature inside himself or herself. And I think that that's true, that we can feel that, we act on certain impulses, but we have inside of us almost every impulse. I think it's why you even, watch a movie about some crime or something, and we can sort of imagine one side of ourselves can identify with it. We control that. We control.
So you want to
those
kill
urges.
and kill again? Is
No,
what you're
no.
saying? We getting this?
I've been accused of a lot of things, not yet of being a
Okay.
serial killer, but somehow
Well, hold on a second. I've got your travel records, some suspicious behavior. Well, the book is a delight. You've done it again, Mark Twain, and he's just, I mean, the sign to me of a great biography is that there's no way to completely capture this guy, but I think this is going to be the standard bearer. I think you need to read this book. You need to read this book because it's not just about Mark Twain. It's also about America. It's also about where we were then, and it's also somewhat about where we are now. So I congratulate you, and huge thrill to have you on the podcast because I love this stuff.
Oh, I
really
feel
do.
like it's a privilege to be with you and the whole group today, and I feel like you really have done honor to the book and to Mark Twain. So thank you for reading it and reading it so closely and attentively. It's really been a great experience.
Oh, I guess we all win then.
Well,